Greetings, bones and ghouls. You know, that's just fun to say even outside of July, so I'm just gonna keep saying it. It's time for Immersive Sims! Something I've been waiting for, and I know a lot of you have been waiting for too for quite some time, is now finally here. It's time for Peripeteia. I wonder if I'm finally saying that right after all these years. I was among the many who pledged to the Kickstarter for this game back in late 2020, I think? And I was also lucky enough to be given advanced access to the early access release of the game to make you all this video. In case you haven't been with us for a while, Peripeteia is a cyberpunk-themed immersive sim made by developer group Ninth Exodus, where you play as Marie, a cyborg mercenary who's trying to figure out her own past in the magical land of Poland 2. Or, on a more serious note, the modern day remains of Poland, as in this timeline things got pretty wild in Eastern Europe and by extension the whole world, and while there are various factions like the Polish Solidarity Republic, borders are essentially suggestions with how often they're violated. Marie's gonna need to do some mercenary work to find the means to learn about who she is, and there is no shortage of work, and certainly no shortage in the variety of tools she can use to get the job done. So like I said a sec ago, this is an early access release, not the final release. This is gonna be rough around the edges, and I think you'll see why just by looking at the gameplay as I talk. That being said, there's already a lot to like here, and this might just be exactly what you've been looking for, or at the very least, something you're going to want to stay tuned for when the crinkles get ironed out. Additionally, while I was given early access to this over a month ago, and I immediately downloaded it, I intentionally made the choice to not start playing the game immediately and waited until last weekend to start playing because I had a sneaking suspicion there was going to be a lot of patching between when I got the game and when it came out, and based on my Steam download queue every day, I was 100% right. I wanted what I experienced to be as close to what you'll experience as possible, and while according to Perry's own EA description, this is about 70% of the game, I did not get all the way to the end of that 70%, and that is entirely by my own actions to make sure that what I was playing is accurate to what you will be playing. I'm presently about 6 hours deep into the game, which is about midway through the 4th level. Now tell me something. Do you like guns? Lots of guns? Then oh man, are you gonna like Peripeteia. Some games like to brag about the varieties of lead propellant based murder techniques they have, but Peripeteia earns that distinction. There's a positively absurd amount of guns to choose from in this game so far. I think they're gonna add even more later when they get to the Kickstarter backer rewards, and even before that there's a wide variety of both Warsaw Pact and NATO based weaponry to choose from, plus a few odds and ends here and there. I think I mained a different set of weapons on every level I played, and there is some pretty absurd stuff as is. I started in one level primarily using an old Mosin with a laser attachment, which was pretty handy for clearing enemies from long distances. Played the second using a combination of Glocks I pilfered off the fallen enemies, and the ever-present over-under double-barreled shotgun. And by the third level, I had a whole slew of guns, including an LMG, a smattering of AK variants, and a goddamned anti-tank rifle. Fun fact, the anti-tank rifle is so powerful that not only will it instantly kill anyone who is hit by it from any distance, and then kill the people behind that target, and then the people behind those people, but the projectile is so powerful that anyone within a few meters of the round's path of travel is going to get knocked unconscious by the shockwave it creates. I'm not playing a non-lethal run though, so no loose ends. And if lots of guns wasn't cool enough, there's also a hell of a Tetris inventory system that not only includes rotating your items to get everything to fit, but additionally you can attach and detach magazines from duplicate guns to keep the extras you find for yourself. Unload that single round in the chamber to get every last round, take the rounds out of that magazine, and then organize the rounds back into other magazines so you have fully topped off ones for when you're going into battle. Funnily enough, that gives you extra incentives to try and take out enemies from stealth, because the less rounds they fire at you, the more rounds left in their magazines for you to steal. Marie's a cyborg, and being a cyborg means she has cool abilities: enhanced perception, which slows down time, a cloaking device, fall damage negation, which can be very handy in some levels, mind control, and the one I use the most, night vision. Thank goodness that night vision's energy cost is negligible, because this game gets dark, like really dark. I know YouTube's compression sometimes ruins darkness in videos, so you might need to take my word for it here, but rest assured that the world of Peripeteia is dark in both metaphorical and literal senses. This is by design, as though there are many massive buildings you'll be exploring, they're a step away from being utterly destroyed. Most are bombed out hovels with no lighting, let alone electricity, and are lit with at most a few old barrels burning whoever is squatting in them can find to keep warm. Operational elevators or functioning computers are a rarity, which is a good time to also mention that the hacking minigame in Peripeteia is literally just mashing buttons until you guess your way through the password. I wasn't kidding about the size of the buildings. Levels in Peri are enormous. It's not just the scale of destruction, but the scale of, well, everything. It makes you feel very, very small, but also gives you lots of opportunities to find alternate paths that aren't just ventilation shafts. It's overtly recommended by NPCs that you travel by rooftop in some scenarios, but traveling by old gas pipes, through abandoned apartments, and anything else you can find is going to be an option. A side effect of this is that you are going to get lost. A lot. There are tons of long pathways that just lead to nowhere because where they used to lead is no longer standing, and things that look like they could have been a natural pathway to where you want to go end up having a chasm a little too big for you to jump across. Peripeteia doesn't exactly have a parkour system, but Marie can ledge grab onto just about anything, and with some creative jumping, you can go pretty far, but not everywhere. I found myself getting completely lost and sometimes even going in big, ruin traversing circles because while there are some signposts to help you see where you need to go, there isn't any sort of map as these levels are huge and again completely bombed out at best. I eventually found my way though. Something you'll find as you're wandering around are the little side stories or quests like the one you get the anti-tank rifle in that you pick up from the barman at the 3rd level, or the dudes just hanging out in this building way out of the way that, as far as I could tell, aren't related to any sort of quest in that level. It's an odd balance to strike for Peri, as the setting is a husk of a nation where settlements are few and far between, if at all, but if you look hard enough, you'll find people and their stories. And if you don't look hard enough, there's always just chatting it up with the hallway weirdo that lives next door to you in the apartment. Finally, while I titled this section More ? And we'll get to that, Peri's got an interesting split of exploring enormous levels like the first and second ones, which used to be demos, and then having really fast, really intense firefights. Sidebar here, I don't know exactly what they did to the second demo, which is now the first level, but I've done a 180 on it and like it a lot now. Perhaps it's something to do with how there are like 4 or 5 ways to complete the mission according to my own exploration and guesswork. Back to what I was talking about though. Gunfights are fast. Marie moves pretty quickly on the account of being a cyborg, meaning that you can zip around the map with a shotgun if you want to live dangerously, but there are also a variety of weapons really coming into their own once you get into the fighting. Weapons are accurate for what you'd expect of them, with long rifles and Glock pattern pistols being precise if you can stick yourself out of cover long enough to get a sight picture, and stuff like the AK clones and the PKM are essentially bullet hoses until you switch them to single shot, and then if you are very, very careful with your aim, you might just hit something. You might even hit someone in the intended body part you intended to hit them. I'm surprised at how well Peripeteia nails down the feel of all the guns despite there being so many of them. It kind of reminds me of Stalker, or specifically Call of Pripyat, which I really like the gunplay in. Also, for the record, I still haven't found the time to get to Stalker 2 even like on a casual play level, so I can't really speak on the experience of that game. As for the more part of this section, this is, again, early access, and 9th Exodus is going to be working on this for quite a while. That means there's going to be more guns, more levels, and probably a whole lot of fine-tuning along the way. Who knows, maybe even something else. Cooking segment time. Peripeteia takes place in Poland, and I thought I'd try making some pierogis. This is actually my first time ever trying to make these, as contrary to what Cyberpunk 2077 would have you believe, there is not a whole lot of Polish cuisine out on the West Coast. It's more of a Midwestern and occasionally Atlantic thing. I have no idea what I am doing, and this is probably going to be a disaster, but it'll be a fun disaster and a learning experience, so that's okay. I looked over a few recipes for pierogi, and it seems that it's basically a dumpling. Unleavened dough with essentially whatever you want in them. Kinda like how kolache are done way out in Texas, but I presently don't have the time to go get some brisket going, and I'm not exactly sure where in this apartment I put a whole pit smoker. I looked at a few recipes to get the gist of how to make the dough, and then got a rough idea of what to put in them. Let's learn. I'm actually going to start things out a little backwards by doing the filling first. I had a thing of cabbage from meal prepping recently, and that seems to be a thing you put in pierogi, so we're gonna roughly chop that, some yellow onion, and then we're gonna peel and finely cube some potatoes. Most of the recipes I saw called for you to boil and mash your potatoes and mix it with the cheese, but I don't want to do what everyone else does. I'm a weirdo like that. I want to try something other than a mush to put inside my little pierogis. What I want to try is also going to take a sec to cook down though. We're going to start by sweating the onions for a bit, then adding the diced up cabbage, and finally the potatoes with a bit of chicken broth optionally into the mix before we season with laurie's, partially cover, and cook down. I just put laurie's on everything when in doubt, so let's see how this bad boy goes. It'll be considered done once the side of a fork can go cleanly through one of the potato cubes with little to no resistance. Once the filling is underway, we're going to take a sec to finely grate some cheese. I wasn't sure which cheese I was supposed to get, so I got some cheddar and mozzarella. I think I'll try half filling with one and half filling with the other, and thinking about the mozzarella, I could also someday add mozzarella, parmesan, and provolone to make a pizza pierogi. On that note though, I've had a few people ask me to do more vegetarian recipes lately, which makes me realize I very rarely do those, so the little baby calzones are gonna have to wait for another day. Okay, now that we've prepped our filling and it's cooking down, let's make the dough. Now, from what I've gathered from the recipes I've seen, it's pierogi dough tends to be a ratio of about 1 part water to 4 parts flour, and then we got the usual flour, salt, water, fat, and then instead of yeast and sugar, we're just putting in beaten egg. I'm going to soften up the only appropriate amount of butter for any cooking, and then get that ready, beat a couple eggs, and then sift my flour and salt into a bowl, leaving a space in the middle to put in all the moist stuff. Then we're gonna mix all that for a good few minutes until it's solid enough for us to work out on a flour surface before letting it rest in the freezer for a while. We don't really need to wait for this to rise as there's no leavening agent in it, but I think it helps us making sure the dough won't fall apart when we try to flatten it out. Okay, let's literally put all this together. The plan is to first get the now rested dough and roll it out onto a floured surface. Once we get them good and thin-ish, I have no idea how thin this is supposed to be, and spoiler alert, I think I made mine too thick. We're gonna make a bunch of little circles. I didn't have a dedicated circling device, but in a pinch you can be like me and use either a measuring cup or a small bowl. I don't know how big or small these are supposed to be, and just according to going back and putting a ruler up against the bowl I used, mine ended up being 4.5 inches in diameter. I've never actually eaten pierogi before this, so I literally have no point of reference. Set aside your little circles you made, recombine the remaining dough into another flat surface, and keep making these until you run out or, I don't know, get intimidated by the sheer volume of pierogi you're gonna make. Then we're gonna now take our cooked filling off the heat, use a mesh strainer to get rid of any excess moisture, and then, because I've got 2 different kinds of cheese, we're gonna separate the stuff into 2 bowls and mix the cheese into each. My hope here is that the cheese acts like a glue for the filling so that we can have the same effect as making the mush I see in a lot of pierogis without actually needing to mash everything together into a textureless mush. I'm also going to try and keep this warm while we do this because I don't want the cheese to re-solidify and make this a huge hunk of unworkable mass. We're gonna get a pan or two and line it with parchment paper and then dust with flour and get to work. As I understand it, you're not supposed to get too crazy with the amount of filling here, just a spoonful in the middle. Then you line the edges with water, fold it over, and finally pinch them shut for that pierogi shape. Then I guess you just keep doing this until you run out of something. Once they're all done, you gotta freeze them, which it says to put them in bags, but I'm sure it's fine if you just keep them on the tray, like if you're gonna eat them right away, but my freezer is really full of chicken scraps for big soup later on this month and meal preps, so I'm going with the bag route. Also, I'm not sure if I did it for long enough. According to just looking at the clock, these were in the freezer for about 5 hours and change before being cooked. Okay, so after the pierogis have had, I'm gonna be honest, I recorded the prep for this in the morning and then came back after doing the voiceover, hitting the gym and all that good stuff. The 5 hours and change we gave them, I don't know if that's definitive. We can now cook them. They're basically like ravioli. You just get some water hot, you dump them in, you take them out when they float to the top. I suppose you could cover these in some sort of sauce and Parmesan if you really wanted to, but I think that might cross a line somewhere, but I don't know with whom. You can also deep fry these after cooking, but you guys are concerned enough with my impulses as it is. And I also recently entered a weight loss challenge at my local gym, so such actions would be counterproductive. So for the reasons we'll get into later, I'm going to make another EA video of Perry at the end of this year as a follow-up, and I'm going to try making pierogis again. I want something from you though. I want all your suggestions on what to put inside the pierogis. They don't have to be good. They don't even have to be bad. I'm just going to pick the most interesting sounding ones and try try them. If we can basically put anything into these like they're kolache, I don't see any reason why I can't do it with pierogi too. Give me your best ideas. Give me your worst ideas. Just leave something in the comments to fill the void that are these little dough circles. As I read this draft out loud, my wife has suggested dehydrated or condensed Mountain Dew, so that's the baseline here. The full recipe for these is on my Patreon, by the way. Now, let's get back to the game. Hey everyone! To absolutely no surprise on my own end, the morning of Friday as Peripeteia went live, I booted up my computer and sure enough, there was a 3.9 gigabyte patch on the day of launch for me, which for reference, the whole game is 5 gigs and change. I am totally unsurprised by this and I'm adding this addendum to the start of the jank section now to just say, take what you see here with a grain of salt, because a lot of this might have been patched out, a lot of it might still be in. So in case you somehow haven't noticed it already, Peripeteia's got some serious jank to it. Now, I know I've been on a tear lately with my indies that are rough around the edges to the point that someone gave me the title, the patron saint of indie jank, but I'm not sure that's quite the replacement for immersive simp, as the last time I was at mass was for my cousin's wedding a little less than a decade ago, and my skin started to sizzle by the time we got to the Our Father. Perhaps the patron of indie jank or the prince of indie jank might be a better alternative to that. That being said, Peripeteia is a what's what of what's wrong with the QA. Features and mechanics don't work as intended, like for some reason if I have both an SKS and an AK pattern rifle in my inventory, neither of them will fire. Sometimes things just don't work at all, like how I could never get the mind control ability to work properly, but perhaps I just missed a certain condition of using it. The AI also sometimes gets stuck behind a corner or in a hallway and just decides to be a sitting duck, or worse, will just start shooting at a wall without having any chance of actually hitting you. The physics of elevators are sometimes off and you'll start taking fall damage, but sometimes it just doesn't do that, so it's okay. The run animation is kind of hokey in third person, and Marie's arms get a little silly when pivoting with certain guns. I could go on, but I think you get the point here. Now, as I said in the beginning of this video, I am playing on a pre-launch version, and while I have already seen quite a few patches just while I sat on the game, there's always a chance that come the day before this video goes live for non-patrons, it'll get another major patch as it launches for everyone. Heck, I just got a patch nearly 2 gigs in size Wednesday morning when I'm writing this script. I've been talking to the guys at 9th Exodus, and they're actually excited in a way to expose y'all to the jank, because having so many fresh sets of eyes on the game will really help them figure out what to bug squash for. There's also some stuff that just literally isn't there yet in Peripeteia, in a most literal sense. Like one of them being character progression between levels. At the end of every level, you'll go back to your apartment before starting the next mission, and while you can go and play around with all the guns in the basement for shooting practice, you'll notice that for one, you're relieved of all your weapons upon entering the train to exit a mission, and for another, anything you take with you from the shooting range isn't coming with you to the next mission. The same goes for any money you earn. So if you saved up a bunch of cash pawning off enemy guns in hopes that you can stock up on healing items or some better weapons in the next mission right off the bat, tough luck. This additionally goes for any non-standard ability implants like the mind controller cloaking field, which are physical items in your inventory too. This makes it very hard and in a way pointless to try and get any of these past the first mission where you get one for free, as by the time you scrap together enough cash from zero to afford nicer augments, most of the enemies you need to either sneak past or murder in an enhanced fashion are already dealt with. And as we've established a minute ago, you can't take any of that stuff with you at the end of the mission. I can very much see by the end scores of missions, which also those just sometimes don't work too, like say if you save the game, close out and load a game and then finish the mission, that there's a score based on how many people you killed and your time in, I believe, seconds. That's cool and all for speedrunners and such, but perhaps having that be a tick box option to just start with the saber and 2 healing items would be a better way to go about that, because it really defeats the purpose of trying trying to amass any good gear beyond like the middle of the level if I'm not going to be able to take any of that with me. And it wouldn't be an indie game struggling to find its footing without some good old-fashioned sequence breaking. Due to the nature of Peripeteia's enormous levels, I often found myself blundering into major objectives, clearing them quite easily with all the guns I've been hoarding, and then I find myself midway through a quest I hadn't even picked up in the first place. It's nice that the game doesn't lock me out because I didn't take the quest to begin with, but also a little off when the game got confused when Marie and the person she was supposed to be talking to about something were hundreds of meters apart, so it just centers on some random point between us, which is mostly the void. Then there's the signposting. You can get a basic idea of where things are and where you're supposed to be, like the key places, but traveling long distances is going to be a problem. I think a big part of me getting lost so much when I wasn't trying to just explore was that in larger spaces, there's very little to mark a path, and it's hard to remember key points of interest when everything is a big, bombed out building or a long, empty hall that may or may not lead to somewhere. I'm not exactly asking for yellow paint here, but some unique markings or say landmarks might help the more novice simmers get by a little better and not bounce off this game by the third level. Okay, now I know this feels like a lot, and it most certainly is, even under the assumption that I'm playing a version of the game that hasn't been fully bug squashed as the initial EA release, and the fact that this is launching into early access. Peripeteia is rough. And I'm being a bit lenient here, and I have my reasons. One of them is that Peripeteia is made by a very, very small team. The core of Ninth Exodus is 3 people, with a handful of contributors helping along the way. On top of that, even with the Kickstarter money, they can only do so much, as lead dev Charlatan is a farmer by trade, and he and I believe everyone else has families they need to take care of too. They don't have the liberty to just ignore life and grind on the game like a younger group of devs would. And secondly, I've actually known something that very few people know about Perry, and for the sake of transparency, I'm gonna tell you now. And for the sake of double transparency, I'm also telling you that I've ran this by Shad et al. At Ninth Exodus due to the nature of this setback. I worked with them to make sure I'm not like accidentally misrepresenting anything and that the information is good, so to speak. I was informed in spring of 2023 by the devs at Ninth Exodus that they had amicably parted with one of their contributors because they were not only behind on the work they were contributing, but what they had submitted wasn't in sync with the rest of the project and would have to be redone entirely to fit the vision of Peripeteia. I don't know if you've ever worked on a big collaborative project beyond the scope of just something in college, but finding out that a person is not only not keeping up, and that on top of not keeping up, the work they did needs to be thrown out and redone is a huge whammy for any production, let alone a team of 3 people relying on 10 others to do like smaller this and that things, including artist Hirantan Fa doing the UI cartoons of Marie, 3 composers on top of the featured music, and a single tester. I'm not going to say that this is a magic hand wave that absolves Peripeteia of all jank and criticism, but I will say that if anything, it's a triumph that this game got into early access at all. Perry effectively lost at least a year's worth of development considering the potential backtracking, and I'd argue that we should have gotten Peripeteia sometime in 2023 and in a much better state than we had got it now in 2025. But that is not what happened. Making something as complicated as a video game is a messy process, especially so when the team is remote and around the world. It's easy to forget that when we see all the stories about one singularly determined indie dev making a genre-defining masterpiece, that is an exception, and a rare exception at that. It's not supposed to be what's expected, and that we gotta be patient with indies as they do not have the millions and millions of dollars and the endless manpower behind them like a lot of AAAs or even AA games have. Video games are hard, man. My final thoughts on Peripeteia, for now, is that there's a lot that could be great about it, but there is also a lot of jank, and that much jank makes it very hard to see the good at times. It's not unplayable levels of jank, it's no Abermore or Deadly Premonition PC port, but enough to give the typical normie pause. If anything, when I think about it, Perry is a lot closer to I Divine Cybermancy than that other Polish cyberpunk game, not just in how it has enormous levels that are very easy to get lost in, but also how it feels like a game that's very rough the first go round, but it's something that'd probably be great once you really get to know the game over many playthroughs. I actually do have a lot more thoughts on Peripeteia, particularly how it does the spooky level, but those things involve spoilers and the game isn't fully finished yet. I'm not gonna put this to bed now. In fact, I'm gonna come back to this at the end of the year or when 1.0 is out, whichever comes first. I don't usually do second looks at early access, but I think I'm gonna give this one a pass based on what I told you in the jank explanation segment. Don't forget to post your bad ideas for what we put into pierogi in the comments for that video. Also, there's the matter of all the Kickstarter rewards and things that are directly in the game that we haven't seen yet as they're being worked on, and I did end up submitting a full set of turnaround reference images in my original getup for the devs, so I have no idea what they're gonna do with those if they end up doing anything with them at all. Speaking of me, I keep hemming and hawing about when the heck I'm finally gonna start streaming again, so I've decided that I'm just gonna go live for the first time in literally 8 years according to my stream scheduler an hour after this video airs. I'm hopefully streaming right now if you're watching this on release day. I have no idea what my schedule for streaming will be, if I have one at all, since some recent things out of my control have shaken up my personal schedule quite a bit, but we'll hammer this out as we go. So just come on down, it's gonna be great. It'll probably be a disaster in the funnest way possible, but it'll be great. For now though, let's sign off. Remember that no matter what you do, be it writing, painting, or fixing radios, what you do is not content. It is art. Content is a word that's been twisted into meaning a means to grind up all your skills, passions, and aspirations into a gray sludge that exists only to make a line go up at your expense. Your art in no way deserves that. Art is inalienably a reflection of its creator, and in no way do you deserve that. So get out there and fight for your art by fighting against the contentification of everything. Stay saucy.
Saucy boy, what is this new contraption? Where did the old contraption go? I wonder what it will do. Any second now. Any second now. Did I set this thing up fast or slow? I think it's a little slow. Oh, there it is. It's a new snack machine. Yeah, the old one started messing up and not dispensing. I could hear the gears turn, but then nothing coming out. So it's okay, we had that one for a good year or so. Let's splurge for the nice one. Jonkulus, what do you not understand? It's the same as before. There he goes. Now you won't have to scream at night because your snack times won't be missed. Man, look at this boy go to town. See? It's a nice new snack machine. It even has a better user interface, so I don't have to spend half a day programming it. Alright, I hope that bowl isn't too much of a steep thing. The previous one was flat. Oh, he's not having trouble. Alright, Chunkulus, I'll leave you to it.